All right, guys, I think that we should be live in the Facebook group. Let's see here. Let me just refresh the page real quick. Double check. All right, let's see here. Yes, we are live. We are live in the Facebook group now. Fantastic. Okay, guys. So since we're live, we are going to talk about a very important topic. But first, let me introduce myself and my mother. If you don't know me, my name is Nikki Hernandez, and I'm an 8th year Spanish teacher. And I have sort of developed this passion about the generational communication aspect because it has really helped me to evolve as a person and as an educator. So today I wanted to bring my mother, and you'll see her a lot more in these next upcoming videos that we have, because she's the one who actually taught me everything that I know about generational communication. And her name is Carla Hernandez, and she's been an HR director for, I think 20, what'd you say? 20 years, 25 years?
25, yes.
25 years. That's incredible. And so she is a master communicator and has taught me, again, everything that I know about the generational differences, and it has helped me so much. So today we're going to talk about a very important topic. We had a new member ask, what can I do to master generational communication? What specifically can I do? So as we were talking, we really wanted to bring you a focused presentation on a key area, a key need of teaching, and that is with emails. In particular, I've seen posts from other educators in Facebook groups, and I've also experienced this myself. And I'm sure, Mom, that you could say that you've probably experienced this yourself too, where you get an email from someone and you feel somewhat blindsided by that, or you may feel attacked, or your integrity may be questioned, your professionalism might be called into question as well. And so what we really wanted to talk about was, how can we address this from a generational standpoint, and what specifically can we do? So, Mom, what do you think is the first step in improving our communication in email format with regards to the generational differences? I know we have first talked about identifying the individual.
Correct. That's the first thing. And there's to identify individuals that may be sending emails. And one of those is whether they're writing in a text or an email format, whether it is emotionally charged, or whether it's very focused and driven, factual charged. Now, what I mean by that specifically is, typically an Xer or a more mature individual is going to write a more focused email. It's not going to be as emotional, but it may have some emotional components aligned with it. And that's generally out of frustration or anger or disapproval of what may be being taught, or the way something was communicated out to them, or something like that. Typically, when an Xer sends you an email, it's to put you on notice that this is something they don't like, they don't appreciate, and they want it addressed. Now, with Xer specifically in this environment, they want very direct communication, very fact-based, and not a lot of emotions. Now, I know that some of our email communications probably go out to the masses, so you're trying to incorporate one email that covers a lot of different things. But particularly on one-on-one situations, typically with Xers, you need to be a little bit more direct and succinct in your process and how you communicate back to them specifically.
So do you think that, so I know that we're talking to people behind the screen, the computer screen. This is not a face-to-face conversation, which can present its own challenges, but it's typically a little bit easier to navigate because you can read the person, you can see their body language, and people just communicate, as you said, differently when they're right in front of you. So you spoke about Xers a little bit. So the question that I have for you is, do you think that when we receive these emails, these one-on-one situation type emails, that it's difficult to identify the individual?
It can be. It can be a little more difficult to identify the person in an email, but there are some very specific things that Xers do versus millennials when they're sending out emails. Typically, if the email is from a millennial, it is going to be very emotion charged with very specific wording. They're going to want, the words, they use words like inclusive, social justice, where an Xer may say, I don't think this is very professional. They'll say different types of things, but they kind of mean the same thing in some texts. Now, I will say that Xers have become recently much more vocal and much more they want to communicate in different fashions. They want that mentality of, I want to be they don't want to be as harmonious as they've been in the past, if you will, and they will leverage things in a certain way. Now millennials certainly have the leverage thing down, where they leverage specific situations and they leverage that to become the victim or something down the road, or whether it be their student or those types of things. So they have that down and they're very specific in their emails. That's why they talk about their feelings. And sometimes and oftentimes it really has nothing to do with the student. It's how they feel, and they're projecting that onto their children or to the student or those types of things. Now, we've seen more of that with the Xer generation as well, that they're projecting these types of behaviors onto their children and their students, and they're becoming a little bit more challenged when you're trying or attempting to communicate with them on an ongoing basis. So the best thing to do in these email situations is read the email very closely, make sure that you've identified, or as best you can, identify the individual and how you want to craft the message, and think about that. Think about it. If you're emotionally charged yourself or you're frustrated, it's time to step away from the keyboard for a bit and just kind of think about how you want to craft this message to this individual. Now, there's three components to this message. First of all, the first thing that you should always do in your email when you're corresponding back and forth to an individual that has sent you an email is to acknowledge their email, thank them for the email, and tell them why you're writing the email. What is the purpose of this communication? The second part of the email is going to be very consistent across the board. And this is going to be something that is not going to change going forward in any part of any communication concerning this situation. And this is where administrators, educators need to be very technical and state no emotions, no adjectives, none of that. Just state the facts, very simple, and be very specific. Now, anything that's put in paragraph 2 has to be fact-based, where you can document it and back it up, either through websites, and handbooks and student handbooks, whatever the situation may be, or documentation that you've had conversations, emails, those types of things. It's very important that middle part of the email is all fact-based. Nothing.
So one thing I think that teachers are feeling sort of frustrated by, and we've all sort of experienced, is this gotcha mentality that you and I were talking about before, where it appears, maybe the perception is wrong, we don't know, but it appears that people, of all generations really, are looking for something to get offended by. They're looking for something to be ultra sensitive about. And of course, as educators, we want to be sensitive to that. We want to honor their feelings and sort of validate, their experiences and how they feel. But at the same time, we want to maintain this balance, so to speak, between educating the child, providing them with a fulfilling experience, using valuable resources, and that we may see, that we as educators may see as valuable tools in our classrooms, but yet somebody else may not necessarily see it that way. And when we're talking about specifically these types of people that are looking to, say they're looking for sort of a way in to express themselves and to be sensitive about something, what can we do, to be proactive in dealing with these things? And how can we emotionally process this? What do you think?
Well, I think number one, being proactive is the way to go, but it's staying a step in front of the situation. So if you know, or if you're thinking about doing something on I'll use an example of a book that might be perceived in some cultures or some students or some environments as controversial, is get the buy-in of the administration from the get-go. Get the things approved, communicate what you want to do, what this is about, and how you're going to use it or utilize this information and deploy it to your students and teach it to your students and how they're going to receive this information. It may be a book about
I can give you a specific example, actually, if you'd like to address this. So there was a teacher who had posted about using a particular book that was about a child who had been initiated in a gang. And the book was primarily about the struggle and the obstacles of this individual and what they did to overcome that. And there were some allusions to, violence and that sort of thing in the book, but it was not presented in a graphic way or anything like that. And this was a tool that the teacher really, if I understand what the teacher wrote on social media, and I feel like I can relate to this, and we all really can in some ways, is that she really wanted to use the tools to create empathy in her classroom. She wanted to help her students understand the struggles of a variety of individuals, people who are going through some serious and severe situations, and for them to empathize with that and understand that and connect with that on a human level. That was more or less the teacher's intent in using this resource. Now, in some cases, it's not always as extreme as that. Sometimes the resources might be more lighthearted, but we're still seeing the same type of behavior across the board, even if it's lighthearted. So now for this particular educator who had posted this about the book, what do you think that the teacher could do? Let's just say she did not get the sign off from administration from the beginning. Okay, because she just assumed that it was okay to do. What can she do if she gets these emails from the parent?
Well, first of all, in this situation, that if she didn't have administration's buy-in and she just did this on her own, not realizing that someone may think that this is very controversial and doesn't want that to be taught in the class or that resource utilized, then the second piece of that would be to notify administration to ensure that they understand how and why she was using this book. And what the focus of it was. And it wasn't about gangs or it wasn't about violence. It was about showing or teaching empathy and some other things in the book and how this individual overcame some very challenging circumstances and what they did to overcome those. I think that communication is key there. Once you have explained the situation to the administration, at times administration will say, you know what, let us take care of it from here and we'll communicate with the parent, those types of things. It's always a good idea, especially in very sensitive situations or complex situations, that you have the support of the administration first before you start responding back and forth in email with a parent in regards to a very controversial issue or topic. That is imperative for the success of any educator or any administrator for that matter as well, because that is it's an important communication tool on the parents so that they feel comfortable coming to you as far as, what this is about and how I'm using this tool. And also on the front end of that, had the administration known and they supported this teaching or this book, then it's the educator's responsibility to communicate up front. This is what we're reading. This is how it's used. This is how something is going on, and do a constant check-in. Hey, how's things going? How are the kids? How's your student doing, son or daughter, or what have you? In those situations, it's going to be very important that communication is very transparent, that they don't believe that you were trying to slip something in and not tell them about it. So transparent communication is very key, especially in this environment and culture that we're living in today. It is super sensitive, even hypersensitive, and where people are utilizing some of these different tasks or these things, these gotcha moments to vindicate themselves or to call people out or in trouble, or what we call the cancel culture now. So it's very important that we stay out in front of this and be basically a couple steps ahead, that we're making sure that we're communicating effectively. And that goes, and I'll be honest with you, that goes across all platforms. Now, that's kind of a broad stroke, because on certain emails, especially one-on-ones, if you're, communicating with a millennial, you're going to have to take a little bit a softer approach and how you do that and how you craft your message. Now, again, the first part of the message is going to be very similar. The second part is going to be fact-based, and that's it. And the third part is going to be closing, when you close out the email. Now, I know that some folks or some educators as well as administrators have challenges when they're trying to close out the emails, because it's very sensitive topics. But the key is not to slam the door in their face.
Yeah, can I elaborate on that a little bit? So
Sure.
to give that situation some context, there was another post on social media, and it was also about a resource that the teacher was using. And basically the gist of the email that the parent had written was that the resource traumatized their child, and that it was traumatizing also to the parent, and all of this. And so the teacher had crafted an email. The first part of the email acknowledged the person who wrote it, how they felt. They also acknowledged that the topic that was being discussed was a sensitive one, therefore validating, the feelings of the person who wrote it and sort of speaking to their sensitivity about it. And then the next part of the email, as you stated, was about the facts and how this particular resource was a part of that particular state's standards that needed to be covered and addressed within the curriculum. So the teacher addressed that aspect of things in a factual, objective way. And then where the challenge came in, all of the email was perfectly written, but where the challenge came in was, as you stated, was how to close it. So what some educators had stated was that they felt that if you close the email by saying things like, please let me know if you have additional questions, things of that nature, then what that does in their mind, they felt that it leaves the door open for additional attacks, so to speak, or additional questioning of their integrity and professionalism as a teacher. So they felt that you should just essentially just cut the email off at the end and say thanks and sign your name. Could you address that for us?
Well, first of all, I understand where they're coming from a technical standpoint and a level of professionalism, that they do not want additional pushback. But in these types of situations, sensitivity, and especially if they feel like they're being canceled or stifled, or they're not being heard, that is not going to be acceptable. And that's just going to enrage them on the other end of the screen. So a lot of folks, parents specifically, will sit down in front of their screen and type out a 2-page email and just go on and on and on about their emotions, what they don't like, all these kind of things, and everything that you want. If you want a personal attack or continue to be attacked or asked questions, you do not want to just cut the email off. You may not want to say, well, please let me know if you have any additional questions or concerns, but you can always say, please let me know if you need me to guide you to additional resources that will help you with this matter. And then you're kind of out of it at that point, um, because you're going to go back to the same paragraph number 2, where you're going to give them back the facts. And when you have to correspond with them again, it's going to be per my email on X date, I sent you the following guidelines or following tools to go and research this. Now, Xers are going to go research it. They're going to look for the loophole. And if there's a loophole, you're going to hear about it. And then they're going to come back with additional questions stating what they think is the loophole in this thing or this topic or what have you. If you do not hear from them, more often than not, they're going to research the information you've given them. And if you've given them accurate information, they're going to move on from it. They may have some additional questions. They may call you and say, I don't agree with this topic. I wish we could revisit it at some point. And then you can help guide them to where they need to go for that. Maybe it's to the state, maybe it's to their administrators, maybe it's someplace else, but at least you'll have that open dialogue. But you do not want to just shut the door on that. Now, if you shut the door on a millennial, that's going to be a whole different battle that you're going to experience, because you're going to hurt their feelings, and they're all about the feelings. And then they're going to come back and say, I can't believe you responded to me in this way. They're going to take no matter what the email said, you dismiss them and cut them off at the end. So you say something like them, please let me know if you have any suggestions or if you find additional resources that I can look into to help you or assist you with this matter. That's the way you would end it with a millennial. And then you thank them and then you move forward. Now, I will say this as well, is that emails are a great tool. It's a wonderful tool to document things and memorialize conversations that you may have with individuals, students, parents, administrators, so forth and so on, or your peers. However, my rule of thumb, and that I've used this for many, many years, is that if someone sends me an email and I respond back to the email and they continue to pepper me with questions or additional concerns, I'm no longer sending something out in an email. I am picking up a phone. I'm having a conversation with the individual, and then I'm going to follow up with the email and say, this is per our discussion. This is what we're going to do. Please let me know if I've missed anything. And then you follow back up, and that's kind of it. I mean,
okay, so I have a question for you. The first is, I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. So at the end of the email, especially with the Xers and sure for the millennials as well, we want to give the illusion of keeping the door open by saying things like, please let me know if I can guide you to additional resources, and as opposed to saying, please let me know if you have any additional questions. What do you think the difference is between those two?
Well, questions opens the dialogue to say that you have some say in what's happening and what you're teaching and how you're teaching it. In some circumstances you are, but if it's a state requirement, you're not going to have that type of thing. Now, sometimes it may be appropriate, especially if you're communicating with a student or a parent where there's some unanswered questions. Please let me know if you have additional questions or concerns. But in this specific situation, where it was a state mandated requirement, there was no additional questions you could answer. So that's the reason you craft your message in that way, where you say, I'm happy to look into additional resources for you or links to help you educate yourself on the requirement, but this is what I've been given. So we can do that. Now, a millennial, you're going to have to, kind of craft the message a little bit different at the end, but it says the same thing. It just says, please let me know how I can direct you to additional resources to help you investigate the situation or to look into it or whatever the situation is. It's got to have a little bit more of an emotional component to tie it all back together so that they recognize that you're validating how they feel about the situation, about the subject matter. So it's kind of broad stroke, but it does help, and especially if you're communicating to us about a very generic topic that may not be generic to some, but it's across the board, like a change in some type of rule or change in some type of virtual learning process or those kind of things. You have to make sure that you're crafting your message to everyone, and that especially if your audience in some cases is predominantly millennials or predominantly Xers, you're going to craft your message that's going to be a combination of the two. That's going to have a little bit of emotional component to validate their concerns and how they want to be treated, and the Xer that wants basically give me the facts, tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it.
So one of the questions that I have is, this is, I'm sure, happened to you before. I know it's most definitely happened to me, is that when you get these emails, you're oftentimes in the middle of your day and you're having a good day and just living your life and living the dream. And all of a sudden you get this email and it feels like your whole world is sort of crashing down on you. And you feel like you're in this emotional fog and you don't know, like, what to do. You have all the knowledge, all the dots are there. They're just not exactly connected, but they're there. How can we gain some clarity when we're going through this?
Well, first of all, when you receive an email like that, and I've received them many times, and it will derail your entire day sometimes, and you'll go, the frustration will set in, the emotional component, depending on which generation you're in. Like I'm in the X generation, so I would say, okay, I'm going to go back to that. I'm too frustrated to respond to that right now, and if so, I'm going to respond a little bit more direct than I probably should be. So sometimes I will write an email and just save it to draft and then go back a few hours later and say, let me reread this. And I will tell you 100% of the time I've changed my email. I've either deleted it and started over, or I've extracted a lot of the emotional components out of it. We all have the emotions, so we understand that. But in order for you to be taken seriously and your credibility not to be compromised, you need to make sure that you're responding in a very diplomatic, professional, and sensitive manner always. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to think about how to craft the message and to craft it correctly. Sometimes you have to, put another pair of eyes on it. Maybe it's administration, maybe it's one of your peers. Does this sound okay? Those types of things. And typically, what I like to do in my situation, if I have a doubt in an email that I would send out, I would typically run it across like someone that maybe, in my situation, I would go to my corporate attorney and have them run across, because there's legal components to things that I send out. Now, I will also remind everyone, when you're sending an email, as soon as you hit the send button, it's out there. So every email you craft, you should think that this email could be produced in a court of law. It's very important that your emails are always respectful, we're always sensitive, and that we're always addressing the issue and we're not going off in tangents on for different things or different issues. Just keep it to the email that was sent. You can always address other challenges you may have with a particular situation in a separate email, but keep it to what they're emailing you about specifically. Because if you go in all types of different directions. Sometimes parents have a tendency to do that specifically, that they just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Let me
So
ask you a question about that piece, the keep going piece. In my view, it appears that the keep going piece is stemming from the need to, or the feeling of like, I have to defend myself.
Mhm.
You know, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, yes, in email, what they will do is that um, if you're crafting an email and I try to keep emails or corrective actions or any type of challenging situations to each separate component, so that I'm not that I don't have the appearance of piling on one particular situation. So, like, let's say, for example, you have a student that's not showing up for class or not turning in their homework. They're saying ugly things. They're being disrespectful. I don't know that I would put that all in one email to a parent. I think that that is overwhelming for them. Maybe you start with the email and say, I'm having some challenges. I would like to have a conversation about this. And one of the challenges I have, maybe you list two. Maybe you list the attendance and not turning in the homework, and maybe there's something going on outside of that, but you don't want to have a whole laundry list of things on email, because what you're going to do, you're going to get back, not only you're not going to get back a list, you're going to get an email about each and every topic, and it's going to be what you didn't do as the educator, and it's going to be what you didn't support my child or my student, and those types of things. So you're going to get an email because you're automatically going to put them on in a defensive mode, the parent. So it's key to be, I don't want to say vague, but a little bit more, to state the facts in that center email, and say, and keep it kind. I want to talk to you about a concern I have. I just wanted to have an exchange with you. Can you call me? Those types of things. And you can state what it is in the email. John Doe didn't show up for class 2 days in a row. I'm a little concerned about this. So it has to come from a place of empathy, where you can connect with the person. And if you don't, then you're going to have some challenges on the back end, because they're going to have no choice, because they don't know you and they're not talking to you face to face. Now, we have communications where we can do these all kinds of FaceTime, we can do Zoom meetings, we can have face-to-face interaction with folks, and we can see what their face looks like, how they're responding to things. And most of the time it will be fine. But in our society right now, we have to figure out a way to harmonize our email and our communication. So it's leverage our skills, and this does take practice. So it's not something that is just comes natural to some folks. Some people can do it just very naturally, but more often than not, people cannot do it naturally. They have to practice it, just like anything else that they're
doing. It is so true. I know for me, I was like, probably if I think of where I was my first year teaching, no clue about anything, because I didn't learn any of this. I don't know where, I mean, that's a whole separate topic, but I don't know where you're supposed to learn these skills, because no one is really teaching it. And then, from my first year to my 8th year, I feel so much better about just being able to rattle off a quick email to someone that's kind, that's courteous, that's polite, that's professional, that's factual. And, I might need to read it over 10, 20, maybe even 30 times before I hit send. But I'm confident in my ability to address pretty much any issue head on. And that is because of some of the things that you talked about earlier, which is being proactive, staying in constant communication with the administration. That gives me a ton of confidence and a ton of freedom, I feel like, as an educator, to be able to address these issues, because I know that I've done the legwork. And even if I haven't, everything that I have done in class now usually there's not too many situations where I'm doing something that somebody doesn't know about, but if I am in class, I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. And everything that I do is fact-based. I know exactly where to go. Like, we have a teacher at our school who, as soon as somebody questions him or calls him to the carpet about something related to how he does something in class, he is ready. He is ready with a response. He can quote verbatim the state standards for different things and tell you exactly where to go and why this is the case. And so because of that, being proactive and knowing the standards and all those kinds of things, I feel very much so more confident in my classroom to be able to compose articulate, well thought out emails that address the situation, but also speak to the human component of all of this. Now, I do have another question for you. You said that, let me just take a look at my notes real quick. Oh, yes. You had this great line that you said during our conversation today, which was, let the parents and the students be the emotional ones. You don't be the emotional one in the email. Can you speak more to that?
The key is on that particular component is typically when a student will approach, and especially the Z generation that are in, let's just say, high school now, they're going to have, first and foremost, they're going to be somewhat abrupt or direct, and maybe a little too direct in certain circumstances. The key is for the educator or whomever this is directed at, and usually it's a teacher of some sort that they're directing this to. If the teacher responds emotionally, negatively, or anything like that,
Passive aggressively,
or dismissive, they're checking out right then and there. Your credibility is lost. Now, I'm not saying that what the student did was correct and respectful, but you as an educator and as an individual, you have to be very cognizant of your own behaviors and your own body language to not respond or react to those types of things. You're reacting to a situation which causes problems down the road. So a good way to handle those types of situations is say something like, that's a lot that I appreciate you coming to me about this situation and how you feel. You're validating their emotion. You're not allowing them to use their leverage to control the situation and be victimized. But in turn, you're saying, let me think about this and I'll get back to you. Take a moment or a couple of hours, and then get back with them the next day and come back with a more articulate and composed response that they can relate to, that they feel like they've been validated. That is very important. Parents are going to be emotional about their children. It's just the way it is. There's no other way to handle that. I'm emotional about my daughter. I was when she was in school as well, but I handled those situations with I was firm, but I was fair. And I would listen to what they had to say, but I expected them to do the same for me. And I was very fair. So, and especially in these types of situations, teachers and educators or administration, they can be firm. You can be firm in an email, but you need to be fair and respectful. And recognizing that there is an emotionally charged component to these things or these situations, and make sure that you're navigating and addressing them, or at least touching on them without becoming emotional yourself. When you're writing an email, and I've seen it all the time, I edit things all the time for different folks, and I can tell you that people love to use adjectives. And that's one thing that you should not be using in email. They're not needed. State the facts. Don't be emotional. And the same thing when you're talking to folks. When I have to talk to an employee about a difficult or challenging situation, I never lose my temper. I never lose my cool. I'm I'm very calm. I'm very focused, even if they're emotionally charged or upset. I listen to them, and that is a key component to anything that you're doing in life. Is if you listen, you can respond accordingly, but don't react right away, especially if you feel that you've been attacked or you've been disrespected. Those are some of the things that I hear from employees and from people in general in society, that they feel like they're being attacked. They feel
That they're
like
not in.
they're
Yeah.
not valued. So I think that for students and parents, they need to be valued and they need to be validated. And you can do that in an email in a very soft way, to where even if your message is firm and direct, they won't feel that you're attacking them, and then they will respond in kind to you as well. I've never known employees to, or people in general, to respond. If you respond nicely to them, typically they will respond in kind. There's exceptions to every rule, of course, but most of the time that's what you're going to see. And
So
those
one of the
types of
questions that I have, that's a good point. One of the questions that I have is, let's say, okay, so in the two situations that we looked at, there were specific state standards that had to be met. And then in another case, there's a teacher who just didn't have to. It's not a part of the state standard. It's not a mandate that they use this one particular resource in their classroom. However, with that being said, the teacher feels, so this is just kind of another scenario, the teacher feels that the resource that they're using is valuable. The content of the resource could be perceived as controversial because the purpose behind using this one particular resource is to stimulate interest. It's not to be a plain Jane type thing. It's not to be boring and dull and dense. It's to elicit excitement and to elicit an emotional response, so that the students, and we talk about this with the Zers all the time, is that they do struggle to find meaning in what they're doing. They do a lot of times feel very empty, and they feel like they have a lack of purpose in life. So a lot of teachers are using some of these resources that it's not about shock value or anything like that necessarily, but the resources are designed to sort of create a little bit of tension in the mind, because that stimulates interest. And so while these resources are not a part of a mandate, they're more cartoonish and more fun in nature. I think of like The Simpsons. Think of The Simpsons. The Simpsons is meant to entertain. It's meant to, challenge some views that people have and things like that. But, that's kind of the resources that some teachers are using in their classroom. And in many cases, year after year after year, these teachers are getting bulldozed by some parents who are saying, this video traumatized my students because it promotes inequality of the sexes, or this, or inequality of that, or inequality of this or that. And it's a cartoon, and it's not meant to be that way. And in fact, a lot of the storylines of this particular resource that I'm referring to, the character actually evolves. Typically, they do start out as kind of brusque, rough around the edges type characters, but then they evolve into something different. And I think that the parents, in some cases, when they look at the initial story, the initial storyline, all they see is this rough around the edges character that seems controversial to them, without seeing the whole picture and the value of the content and what this is really teaching their child. So in terms of those types of resources, the ones that aren't necessarily mandated, but that we chose as educators, what do you think we can do to handle those types of situations?
I think that, especially if these resources are used year over year over year,
Yes.
I think that you constantly need to be evaluating your resources that you're using to make sure that they make sense now in our society. Okay, number one, that we are being sensitive to individuals that need to be. Now, I think that this is something you can also do with these materials, is do like a one-page summary of why you're using this resource, and these are the resources we're using, and these are the reasons why, and just kind of give a little sound bite of each one and how it evolves over the course of the year and what you want the result to be. It's Xers are typically not going to be as concerned with those types of situations, although, as we alluded to earlier in this conversation, they have become more sensitive. And anything that anyone, the key is to be out in front of it, like 2 steps ahead. Make sure that these communications are gone out and they stay out with individuals, and that they understand the complexity of it and what you're trying to do, trying to teach here. It's not that we're trying to teach people certain views or opinions or anything like that, but we are, especially with the Z generation, that is very task oriented, very robotic, and those types of things. They are not. They're going to do what you ask them to do, and they're going to check the box. There's some challenges that they may have, because there may be a literacy issue where they are not comprehending what they're reading, so the parents are helping them read it. So that may be causing some confusion and some dialogue as well. So if you get out in front of those situations, you're going to be better off. And it's email communication, it's Zoom communications where you're talking about these things, or in the first year packet, these are the things we cover. Please let me know if you have any concerns about anything that we're covering, or if you have any questions about that. It doesn't mean that you're going to stop covering these materials, but you can kind of alleviate or just go in a different direction if you need to. But I think all educators should be looking at their materials at least annually or every couple of years to see if the information that they're using now still makes sense and is still relevant. And maybe you do something like that. Now, with Z specifically, in these types of situations, I like to refer to them as, here's an empty glass every day, and you're filling them up every day. You're trying to get them to feel something, be passionate about something, find their passion, and see what they can do, and enlighten them and guide them. We're not trying to tell them how to live their life or what opinions they should have or any of those types of things, but guide them to the resources so that they can look it up and make those choices themselves. I will tell you that in most situations where I have coached individuals and asked them to look up things and to do their homework basically on situations, they always feel empowered after that. They feel good about themselves, and there's a component to that is priceless for all those students. So it's something that has to be reinforced. And again, for Zers, they need to know how to communicate as well. They need to be able to communicate effectively with the educators and the administrators, and even their parents. Sometimes they have challenges with the communication just because of the generational gaps that they have. If they have a millennial parent, they may have challenges because they think more like an Xer. The Zers do. They have more in common with an Xer. Very checklist, oriented. They like to fix things. The only difference between the Xer and the Z right now is that the Zers are buying into some of the millennial tasks where they are using their leverage to be victimized in some of these topics that they don't want to do. If there's something they don't want to do, they're learning these types of behaviors where, if we got it the right way as educators and as parents and different types of things, they will be able to turn the corner and make those decisions on their own and be productive.
Yeah, and like what you talked about, like, we've chatted about this many times before, but you made the good point that these decision-making processes that we engage in as teachers and the guidance that we provide our students, it has lifelong implications. And especially with the Zers, if they learn, and it is happening more so now than I think I've ever seen it before. It just seems like it's ramping up. If they learn to leverage victimization as a tool for a valid tool for communication to get what they want or to become powerful in some way, you know, there's going to be a price to pay for that. And maybe I'm coming across as too direct, but if that is the case, that's the route that someone wants to go down, if they want to leverage victimization as a way to get power or control, then there's a price that that person is going to have to pay. And that price is that their life is going to not have fulfillment. It's not going to have any kind of happiness, and it won't have any kind of meaning. It's going to remain empty. And I feel like that's a dangerous road. That's just a road that we don't really want to go on as teachers. So this mindset that you have about emailing and being courteous and being polite and being the model and teaching the students how they can communicate effectively to get the desired outcome in a polished, in an effective way without having to do all these other things, then that's going to really empower them as individuals. And like you said, it's going to feel different for them. They're going to get a different feeling from that, a feeling of gratification and of satisfaction in themselves that they truly have accomplished something. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely true. I think independence should be in there also. They'll have an independent thought process, and that's what we need to teach them, that it's okay for you to think outside of the confines of, school or the confines of your home or what you're going to do in the future. Think big, but you need to also think about how you're treating people on the front end and how you're being perceived by your peers or your educators or administration. You want people to respect you. You have to do the same in return. And some of that communication, because they like to communicate on their devices, and that verbal communication sometimes can come across as a little terse, a little abrupt, a little too direct, especially with the Zers. And Xers are very much like that as well. They like direct communication, but because of the era that they grew up in, they're very polished in their communication, but they're very direct, and they can be firm. But if you respond back to them in kind, they're going to be professional and kind in return. Millennials, they're very educated, very smart, but they do wear their emotions on their sleeves, and they do, and they can be very articulate in their responses to you, but they're always emotionally charged. So you have to respond in kind to them, but not emotionally. You have to respond with fact-based information, but end it in an emotional way where you're validating how they feel without compromising your own communication strategy that you have. So that's very important. And like I said, earlier, these things don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of practice to constantly identify who you're speaking to. I can do it probably within a couple of seconds of meeting someone, just because this is what I do all day, every day. And I can usually tell how they're going to respond. And I think Nikki could probably share with you a couple of situations where I just knew walking into the room how they were going to respond. And they responded exactly like I thought they would.
It's no joke. When she says that, it's no joke. Like, I'll tell you guys a funny story and then we'll end it with this. But one time when I was a kid, there was a situation and there was a person in a gym in a basketball game, lots of people there, a big crowd, hundreds of people, players, all that kind of stuff. And I had told my mom, I said, you don't know what this person looks like, but these are this is who this person is. And I just described in my mind who the person was to her. And she walks in the gym literally 5 seconds later, out of hundreds of people, a sea of people, a crowd, points to the one person that I was referring to, never had seen the person in her life, and says, that's her. And I was shocked. I said, "How did you know?" It's unbelievable. And that's not the first time that this has happened. So, yeah, no, you're so right. So anyway, guys, if you have any questions about anything at all, please just feel free to reach out to either one of us on Facebook. You can contact us directly, and we would be thrilled to be able to work with you, whether it's in a teacher capacity, as a parent, as an administrator, as a teacher. We'd be absolutely thrilled to help give you some guidance and very tailored guidance to your specific needs and your specific setting. So if you're interested in that, again, just feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions, post it in the group. We'd be happy to talk about it and do another Facebook Live to give you some resources and some tools that you can use to be successful. Is there any last words that you'd like to say, Mom, before we close this out?
No, thank you. I really appreciate being on here. This was fun.
Yes, it really was. It was really cool. And thank you to the viewers for watching. And we'll see you next Sunday, hopefully. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.